We're in Genesis chapter 49. Genesis chapter 49, if you have a Bible, we've been going through Genesis for a little while, and we are in chapter 49. So we're getting really close to the end. And what we've seen are some of the last moments at the end of Jacob's life. Jacob, also known as Israel, at the end of his life, some of his last steps, the last things he's going to do, which include adopting, so to speak, Joseph's two sons. So he brings them into his fold, and they will receive part of an inheritance in the nation of Israel. And so Joseph then gets a double portion instead of just his single inheritance. We see him blessing those guys, blessing Joseph and speaking to them. And then in chapter 49, we see what is often titled Jacob blessing his sons, or Jacob's last words. And so Jacob is going to address in chapter 49 each of his 12 sons, and he is going to bless them. Okay, so air quotes on that, because it's not always that good. All right, usually conveying some kind of favor is meant in the word blessing. His blessings to them are not only favor, there is some of that, but a lot of it is prophetic. So he's going to tell them not even what's going to happen in their life, but what will be the fate of the tribe that their name will bear. So the tribe of each of these sons, each of these sons will have one of the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, and he'll speak prophetically about that tribe. And sometimes in here, and we'll see in just a moment, there's going to be some short-term understanding to these prophecies and a long-term understanding, which is often the case in biblical prophecy. You have a double meaning. And so we'll see that here tonight as well. There's 12 sons that are blessed here, and I'm not even going to try to do all 12. We're going to look at 4. All right, can we do 4? Y'all handle that? I got 5 pages of notes on 4, so we'll see. That's right, 4. 4 is really merciful. All right. Well, first of all, it says this, before we get into the sons, the first 2 verses are this. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather around, and I will tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Come together and listen, sons of Jacob, listen to your father Israel." A lot of interesting things going on there. He tells them, come together, listen. He refers to himself as Jacob and as Israel, both in that little quick introduction to this prophetic word. But I wanted to talk just for a second about the fact that he says, "Gather around, and I will tell you what will happen in the days to come." Once again, this is not Jacob's words. These aren't his ideas. These aren't just some things he came up with, and we go, "Oh, what a coincidence." That actually turned out to be true. This is God speaking through Jacob in a prophetic sense. So Jacob in this way is a conduit of God's word for these men who will represent whole tribes in a nation one day with millions of people. And he says, "Come, and I'll tell you what will happen in the days to come." And I just want to think about that for a second. You know, God, and I mentioned this last week, but God knows the future. You know, God, we can see the horizon, and that's it. We can just see what's immediately in front of us. And oftentimes we think we know, probably too often, we think we know what's going to happen. We think we can read the signs in front of us and from that deduce what will come in the future. But the truth is, we have no idea what the future holds, but God knows every detail. He knows every twist and every turn. Who knows the amount of surprises that you will see in the next year or the next decade? God knows. God knows every single one of them. None of them are a surprise. God has already been there. He knows the future as intimately as He knows the past and the present. And He knows all of that, and He holds all of it in His hand. That's good news when you pray to God, because you know He knows the future. And I saw this, and maybe you saw this, but I saw this kind of posted today for 9/11 being the 23rd anniversary. And it just was a couple of people who survived 9/11. One of the gentlemen who was in the towers, was supposed to be in the towers. He wasn't there for the attacks because he took his son to kindergarten that day for the first day of kindergarten. Another one, it was his responsibility that morning to pick up the donuts for the office. So he wasn't in the towers. Another one got stuck on the New Jersey Turnpike because of a wreck. And so she didn't make it there on time for the attacks. Another one spilled food on her clothes on the way out the door, so she had to turn around and go back in and change clothes, and because of that, she'd missed the attack. Another one could not find a taxi. Another one on the way to work was walking in a pair of new shoes and got a blister on his foot and had to go into a pharmacy and get a Band-Aid for his foot, and because of that, he wasn't in the towers when they were struck. And so all these circumstances that hit us in our life, you know, when you get stuck in a traffic jam on a turnpike, when you're on your way out to work and you're running late and you spill something on your clothes and you have to go back in the house and start over, that's a bad day. Or is it? And we don't know. But you know, God knows every little thing that takes place in our life. He knows all of it. And so when we read prophecy in the Bible, we read it as someone who knows every twist and turn. And when we live our life and go through all the things we go through, and we pray and we say, God, why? God, what's going on here? God, I'm having a bad day. Understand, you pray to a God who sees and knows everything. And that stuck out to me in that one sentence. Let me tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. So he says, come together and listen to me. The first one is Reuben in verse 3. And it says, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, and the first fruit of my virility, excelling in prominence and excelling in power. So far, so good for Reuben, right? Just wait. Turbulent as water. You will not excel because you got into your father's bed and you defiled it. He got into my bed. And so it starts out there. It sounds good. Hey, you're the firstborn. You should be a leader. You know, it should be Jacob handing the baton to his firstborn son, the leader of the 12 tribes, but that is not the case. He says, you are my strength, the first fruits of my virility or my physicality or my strength, excelling in prominence. You had a seat of honor. You had a seat of superiority in power over your siblings. You had a potential to be great. You were set up for greatness. But you weren't great. He says he is as turbulent as water. Like trying to control Reuben is like trying to control water on the ground. And so he has this rug pulled out from him as his father says, listen, you're uncontrollable. You're unrestrainable. You're reckless. He, like water, takes a path of least resistance. And one of my favorite quotes is, the path of least resistance makes rivers and men crooked. And that's the case for him. He says, you will not excel. Your tribe will not be a top tribe in Israel. As a matter of fact, no prophet, no judge, no king ever that we know of came from the tribe of Reuben. And he tells us why this is the case. Even though he had all this promise and all this potential, it's unrealized. He forfeited all of it because of an event that we've already studied in Genesis chapter 35, and it's where he sleeps with his father's concubine, Bilhah. And so that follows right on the heels of chapter 34, where Dinah is assaulted. And so you kind of see this turmoil in that phase of the life of Israel, the Israelites. But he, usurping his father's authority, disregarding the at least somewhat sanctity of this marriage between Jacob and his 4 wives, sleeps with his stepmother. It's the mother of his brothers Dan and Naphtali. And so this single act of disobedience forfeits for him the honor of being the firstborn son, the leader of his family, and it has repercussions on hundreds of years of his descendants. You say, well, that's not really fair to them. I mean, why should they have to suffer for the sins of their relative? And it just reminds us that our sin affects more than just us. A lot of times we might think, well, my sin just hurts me. I'm not hurting anybody else, just me. Just dragging myself down, just defiling myself. But no, we see with Reuben that this one single act of disobedience taints the whole legacy of his life and his progeny. And it's important to know this. Now, could God forgive that act of disobedience? Yes, absolutely. God can forgive every act of disobedience, right? God can forgive anything. Amen? Make sure we're all on board with that. But there's still consequences to our actions. And this is one of them. This is one of them for him. And sometimes sin does irreparable damage. And Reuben is a symbol of that, particularly in regard to sexual sin or sins of infidelity. And so, though he had great promise, it all is forfeited, and he goes from being the greatest in his family to the least in his family. Jesus said some of the first will be last, and the last will be first, and Reuben will be a great example of that. So we're not off to a good start. We hit the next two brothers, and it just gets worse. Simeon and Levi are referenced in verse 5. They're grouped up together. They don't even get an individual blessing, right? It says Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their knives or their swords are vicious weapons. May I never enter their council. May I never join their assembly. For in their anger they kill men, and on a whim they hamstring oxen. Their anger is cursed, for it is so strong, and their fury, for it is cruel. I will disperse them throughout Jacob and scatter them throughout Israel. So I want to, I didn't point this out on Reuben, and it's relevant for Simeon and Levi. Notice verse 4, end of verse 4, it says, he got into my bed. And so verse 3 says, Reuben, you are, so Jacob is directly addressing Reuben. And then at the very end, he seems to turn from Reuben and address the other brothers that are there. So it's as if he's been speaking to Reuben, and then he says, he got into my bed, and speaking to the other brothers. And then Simeon and Levi, they never get a direct address or a personal address. It's all in the third person. He says, Simeon and Levi are brothers. He never addresses them personally. He says their knives are vicious weapons. Their swords are vicious weapons. Certainly referring to chapter 34 in Genesis. And if you recall, chapter 34 is where Dinah, their sister, is raped by Shechem. Dinah being their full-blood sister, so they're all children of Leah. Simeon, Levi, and Dinah are. And a Canaanite man named Shechem, decided he wanted to marry her, and he goes to her and assaults her, rapes her, and then gets his father to go to Jacob to try to purchase or pay a dowry for Dinah. And Simeon and Levi respond in anger, which is the appropriate response for something so awful and cruel and disgusting, like rape or sexual assault, any kind of way. It's always bad, always wrong, completely, and they respond in anger. And then they go too far. How many of you know sometimes our anger will take us too far? So they don't go to the man who committed the crime and kill him. What they do is they deceive the whole town, the whole village of the Shechemites, and they say, listen, yeah, we'll let you marry our sister, and but first, it wouldn't be right if we were to allow her to marry somebody uncircumcised. We're circumcised, you guys aren't. It's against our custom, so if all you guys will get circumcised, then we'll let you marry our sister, and our daughters, and that kind of thing. And the Shechemites say, deal. And the Bible says on the third day, when they were still sore and healing, Simeon and Levi take their swords and they go in, and it says they kill every male. It does not say they kill every man. It says they kill every male. The word male there is used to refer to anybody who gets circumcised. So I point that out to say that, a boy would be circumcised on the 8th day. They kill every male. So certainly there's young men, children, included in any town, any village. And the brothers join them. They come in and they take all the possessions off and haul off the people as slaves. But it's Simeon and Levi who go in there and kill everybody. Now, every single one of those guys was innocent except for one. Certainly the children are innocent. They don't just go take out their anger on the one guy. That'd be justified. They go and kill everyone. Cruel, inhumane. And that's how his anger is described. Cruel, furious, all these words are used. And it also says they kill men. Also, they hamstring oxen, is what it says. And that's not recorded in chapter 34, but apparently that's something that took place probably in chapter 34, that same episode. But that would be where you would cut the tendon on an ox so that they would not be able to walk anymore. It's a really cruel way of killing an animal because you could just kill it, or you can essentially render it unable to walk itself to water and to food, and it will just lay there and suffer and die. And I think the point of that is to say they are just cruel, inhumane. I mean, obviously an animal's life is nothing compared to a human being's life, but still, even to treat an animal like that, terrible. And it just is evidence of their cruelty. And he says this, may I never enter their counsel. May I never take advice for them. I would never listen to them. He says, may I never join their assembly. I don't want fellowship with them. I don't want to be in their company. That's the kind of people that they are. The wisdom there for us today is be careful whose advice you take. Right? May I never be in their counsel. Be careful whose advice you take. Right? Sometimes we take advice from people that tell us what we want to hear. Sometimes when we want to hear, we go to the people that we know will tell us what we want to hear, and we ask them for their advice to strengthen our position, at least in our minds. And also, be careful whose company you keep. Be careful keeping the company with unstable and angry people, because those folks will get you in trouble. Anybody? That's true. Everybody knows that, especially maybe gentlemen, if you grew up with a buddy who lost his temper a lot, it means you got dragged into a lot of fights with him. And I had a friend like that. And that's the issue here, is their anger. Their anger. Strong, furious, cruel. Now, they're angry against sin, right? We're supposed to be angry. Christians love to say that, don't we? We love to quote that verse. Hey, Bible says, be angry and sin not. We love that verse, don't we? The problem is, have you ever tried that? It's real hard, huh? It's hard. Proverbs says, a fool gives full vent to his anger, but a wise person holds it in check. James chapter 1, verse 19 tells us why anger is not a good thing. It says, my dear brothers and sisters, understand this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to become angry. Here's why. For human anger does not accomplish God's righteousness. It's hard to be angry and righteous at the same time. Now, our response to sin should be emotional, right? It should make us angry. We hear a situation like Dinah being abused, or anybody being abused or hurt or oppressed. It should make us angry. But the problem with anger is it's hard to keep under control, and often it will take you farther than you want to go. And so, because they are furious in their anger, cruel in their anger, here's the curse that's given upon them. It's not a blessing, it's really a curse. He says, I will disperse them throughout Jacob. And that's what takes place. So the tribe of Simeon dwindles later on to almost nothing. Actually, out in the wilderness, they leave Egypt, and there's a census in the first part of the book of Numbers, and it's the third biggest tribe. Of the 12, it's the third biggest. And by the time they do the next census, when they're getting closer to the promised land, towards the end of their wilderness wandering, it is the smallest by far. And so that's the case. It ends up being that they don't have any territory in the promised land of their own. Joshua chapter 19, when they finally conquer the Canaanites and they're entering the promised land, they're dividing up the land according to the tribes. They are given some cities, but all their cities are completely surrounded by and really encapsulated in the property of the land of Judah, Judah's land provision, because Judah at that point is so big. As a matter of fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 33, when Moses is blessing all the tribes, Deuteronomy 33, by the way, very similar to this blessing in Genesis chapter 49. As a matter of fact, it's actually more of a blessing. This is more of a prophetic word. But in Deuteronomy 33, the tribe of Simeon is not even mentioned in the blessing. It's so small by that point. So that's the case for Simeon. What about Levi? Well, it says that they'll be dispersed throughout Israel, so they won't have a land of their own. And we know that's true about Levi as well. The Levites are the priestly order, right? The priests are the Levites that are direct descendants of Aaron, and the rest would be Levites who would serve in the temple and the tabernacle and that kind of thing. And they are dispersed. They are given no land allotment in the promised land. Now, the reason's a little bit different. See, for the Levites, they were able to take from and eat from the offerings to the temple. They got a share in the temple offerings and the sacrifices and things like that. And so God gives them no land because they don't have to raise their own crops and animals and things like that. Instead, He gives them cities to live in. Those cities are spread out through all of Israel. They would travel to Jerusalem to do their temple service as it was their turn. Now, the thing that's different about Levi is that the tribe of Levi kind of redeems itself, which is interesting. The Simeonites do not, but Levi kind of does for a couple of reasons. First of all, most famous Levites, besides Levi, probably more famous than Levi actually, Moses and Aaron. Moses and Aaron. And so as Moses leads the Exodus out of Egypt and takes the Israelites into the wilderness, recall, he goes up on Mount Sinai. While he's on Mount Sinai, the folks down below throw a little party, build a golden calf, and start worshiping the golden calf. Unfortunately, Aaron leads that. Moses comes down, smashes the tablets, he's upset, he's mad, and he goes to the front of the camp, and he says these words, "Everyone who's with God, come over here." And the only ones who go over there are the Levites. And then God tells the Levites to go and enact punishment on the rest of the people with the sword. But many commentators point out the fact that they were the ones that stood with Moses. They stood with God against the golden calf, against this rebellion in the wilderness, and they've somewhat redeemed themselves from their ancestor, Levi. Which is good, you know. I mean, these people live in the consequences of their ancestor, the brother, the son of Jacob, whoever it is, and because of these prophecies. But God also deals with them individually. And there is redemption no matter where you come from. We see that from Levi to some extent.